The air trembled with a sharp crackle, like lightning splitting a quiet dawn. Zeke Carter, 79, a blind veteran, crumpled to the pavement, his cry piercing the chaos of a bustling city crosswalk. His white scarf, a tattered keepsake from his army days, worn proudly against his chest, fluttered loose, snagging on the asphalt. Beside him, his loyal service dog, Shadow, whimpered, nudging Zeke's trembling hand as a young officer's voice barked, "You're blocking the road." The taser's hiss lingered, a cruel echo over the honking cars at Pine and 4th. Zeke's cane, white as his scarf, skittered under a tire, lost in the frenzy. It was a bright morning, the kind where sunlight dances on shop windows, but for Zeke, the world was sound and touch, Shadow's steady gait, the chirp of the pedestrian signal, the rhythm of his cane tapping the ground. He was crossing to reach the library, where children waited for his storytelling hour, their giggles a warmth he carried in his heart. But now, pain seared through him, his body betraying the strength that had carried him through decades of darkness. The scarf, a symbol of his service, lay dirted in the street, just as his dignity seemed trampled by those meant to protect. Zeke had lost his sight in a forgotten war, not to gunfire, but to a fever that stole his vision in a muddy jungle outpost. He'd woven that scarf around his neck ever since, a reminder of comrades who never came home. It was his anchor, his pride, guiding him through a sightless world with Shadow by his side. At 79, he lived simply, his days woven with routine. Walks to the veteran hall, audiobooks humming through his small apartment, the scarf always close. Why, then, was he now sprawled on the ground, a taser's sting coursing through him? Why did Shadow's bark sound so desperate? The crowd gasped, phones flashing, capturing the unthinkable. A blind elder, a hero, struck down. A woman's voice cut through, "He's blind. Look at his dog." Yet the officers, faces taut with adrenaline, saw only a delay, a disturbance. The white scarf, once a banner of honor, now seemed a flag of surrender, caught in the grit of misunderstanding. But something stirred beyond the sirens, a deeper rumble, like thunder rolling closer. In minutes, this intersection would shift, not just for Zeke, but for a city about to face its reckoning. If you believe heroes who gave so much deserve our care, not cruelty, let this story grip your heart. The scarf, Zeke's silent vow, would soon wave again, not in defeat, but in a rising tide of justice. The sun hung high over Pine and 4th, its glare bouncing off windshields as cars growled, impatient for the light to shift. Zeke lay crumpled in the crosswalk, his white scarf smeared with street grit, a faint pulse of pain throbbing where the taser's barbs had bitten. Shadow pressed close, her whines sharp against the clamor of horns. Patrolman Lucas Reed stood over him, taser still in hand, his voice jagged with nerves. "I told you to move, sir. You're causing a scene." Zeke's breath hitched, his world a blur of sound. Shadow's barks, the crowd's murmurs, the screech of tires. His fingers fumbled for the scarf, its frayed edges a lifeline to the man he'd been. A soldier, a survivor. In that jungle, long ago, he'd tied it around his neck to stave off fever's sweat. Now, it felt like his only shield in a battle he couldn't see. Zeke's mind flickered to a memory, vivid as the pain. He was 22, crouched in a muddy trench, the scarf, then crisp and new, knotted tight as mortars whistled overhead. His squad mate, Jimmy, had pressed it into his hands, grinning. "Keep this, Zeke. It'll bring you home." Jimmy didn't make it back, but Zeke did, though the fever took his eyes. The scarf had stayed with him, through hospitals, through learning to walk by sound, through years of building a life with Shadow's steady paws guiding him. Today, he'd been heading to the library, where kids would crowd around, eager for his tales of dragons and knights. Their laughter was his light, a glow no blindness could dim. He'd tucked the scarf neatly under his jacket, proud to carry it. Why, then, was he now sprawled on asphalt, Shadow trembling beside him? The scarf, his badge of honor, felt heavy, as if soaked with the weight of this betrayal. Across the intersection, Clara Monroe, a barista at the corner cafe, clutched her apron, her heart pounding. She'd seen Zeke and Shadow pass her shop every Tuesday, his cane tapping a steady beat, his scarf catching the breeze. "He's blind, you fools!" she shouted, her voice cracking as she pushed through the crowd, phone shaking in her hand as she recorded. Clara had lost her brother, a veteran, to his own battles years ago. Zeke's quiet dignity reminded her of him. Now, watching Reed loom over Zeke, she felt a surge of fury. The second officer, Patrolman Ethan Cole, hesitated, his hand on his radio, calling in a disruptive pedestrian. Neither noticed the scarf, nor Shadow's vest, nor the white cane crushed under a sedan. To them, Zeke was a problem, not a person, a slow-moving obstacle in their restless shift. Clara's cry hung in the air, unanswered, as the officers' faces hardened, blind to the truth beneath their snap judgments. The moment stretched, taut as a wire. Zeke tried to speak, his voice thin against the chaos. "I'm blind, trying to cross." But Reed's shouts drowned him out. "Stop resisting," he barked, though Zeke's only movement was a trembling reach for Shadow. The dog, sensing danger, tugged at her harness, her paws skittering on the pavement. Cars inched closer, their engines a low growl as the light turned green. Zeke's heart raced, the world collapsing into a cacophony. Horns, shouts, Shadow's frantic barks. He tapped the ground, desperate for his cane, for the scarf, for anything to anchor him. In his mind, he was back in that jungle, lost in fever's haze, Jimmy's voice fading. "Hold on, Zeke." But here, no one was helping him hold on. Reed, sweat beading on his brow, tightened his grip on the taser, his inexperience fueling a reckless choice. Cole, younger still, followed his lead, mistaking Zeke's confusion for defiance. Clara's phone captured it all. The taser's flash, Zeke's sharp cry, the scarf fluttering like a fallen flag. The crowd surged, voices rising in shock. A man in a suit dropped his briefcase, yelling, "That's a service dog!" A teenager, Maya, earbuds dangling, froze, her thumbs hovering over her screen. Clara's hands shook, but she kept filming, her brother's memory spurring her on. She'd failed to save him, but she wouldn't let Zeke be forgotten. The scarf, now tangled near Zeke's outstretched hand, seemed to pulse with his story. A soldier who'd faced darkness and won, only to be struck down in his own city. Reed stepped back, his face paling as Cole fumbled with handcuffs, moving to restrain Zeke as he spasmed on the ground. "He's not resisting," Clara screamed, her voice joining others, a chorus of outrage cutting through the sirens now wailing closer. Sergeant Nora Hayes, gray streaking her hair, arrived in a screech of tires, her cruiser blocking traffic. She took one look. Zeke's crumpled form, the scarf dirted beside him, Shadow's desperate nudging, and her jaw tightened. "Cuffs off now!" she snapped, kneeling beside Zeke, her hands gentle as she checked his pulse. "What the hell happened, Reed?" Her voice was steel, slicing through Reed's stammered excuse of non-compliance. Cole stood frozen, his eyes darting to the growing crowd, their phones a wall of lenses. Nora's gaze lingered on the scarf, its faded stripes a quiet testament to Zeke's service. She'd known veterans, had seen their scars, visible and not. This, she knew, was no crime scene. It was a failure, raw and shameful. Paramedics rushed in, their boots crunching over glass, as Nora waved them to Zeke, her radio crackling with urgent calls. At the cafe, Colonel Marcus Tate, retired, watched from his window seat, knuckles white around his mug. He'd served with men like Zeke, had tied scarves like that one in deserts and jungles. The sight of Zeke's fall lit a fire in him, a vow to act. Slipping out, he dialed a number few knew, a direct line to a military liaison. His voice was low, steady, urgent. "A veteran's down. Blind. Tased. Pine and Fourth. We need to move." The line crackled, then clicked off. Tate returned to his seat, eyes on the intersection, waiting. The scarf, caught in a gust, lifted slightly, as if signaling something bigger. Clara, still filming, felt it too. A vibration underfoot, a shift in the air. 7 minutes. That's all it took for the city's pulse to change. The wail of ambulances faded under a deeper, throatier roar. Not police, not paramedics, but something heavier, primal. An olive-green Humvee, its lights cutting through the haze, rolled past startled officers to claim the intersection's edge. Another followed, then a hulking troop carrier, their tires chewing asphalt as they sealed Pine and 4th in a triangle of steel. Soldiers in fatigue spilled out, sidearms glinting, their steps calm but unyielding. They didn't shout, didn't threaten, but their presence was a wall, unshakable. The scarf, now dusted with paramedic gloves, seemed to catch the light, a beacon in the chaos. Clara lowered her phone, awestruck. Reed and Cole shrank back, their bravado gone, faces pale as ghosts. The crowd hushed, phones still rolling, capturing the surreal. Nora stood, her radio spitting static, dispatch babbling about unauthorized vehicles. She ignored it, her eyes on the lead Humvee's door. It swung open, and a figure emerged, tall, straight as a blade, his uniform crisp, ribbons gleaming like stars. General Daniel Holt, commander of the regional forces, stepped into the sunlight, his boots clicking on the pavement. His face was stone, but his eyes burned, fixed on Zeke, now on a stretcher, the scarf clutched in his trembling hand. Holt had known of Zeke, had read his name in veteran rolls, had heard of his quiet heroism. Today, a call from Tate had pulled him from a meeting, a call that struck like a bullet. The scarf, to Holt, was no cloth. It was a promise, a debt owed to men like Zeke, who'd given their light for others. Holt's voice hung in the air, sharp as a blade's edge, cutting through the static of Nora's radio. The white scarf, gently draped over Zeke's chest by a paramedic, gleamed faintly under the ambulance's lights, a quiet emblem of a veteran's spirit. Zeke, pale but stirring, clutched it weakly, Shadow's muzzle pressed against his side, her whines softening as the paramedics worked. Holt's eyes, cold as winter steel, shifted from the scarf to Reed and Cole, who stood rigid, their faces drained of color. The intersection, sealed by Humvees, pulsed with a new rhythm. Not chaos, but command. An error, Sergeant? Holt said, his tone low, dangerous. Did your officers identify themselves? Did they see the cane, the dog, the scarf that marks a man who served? Nora's jaw tightened, but she held his gaze. No, sir, they didn't. It was a failure of judgment. The scarf, to Holt, was no mere cloth. It was a vow, a debt unpaid, and its dirted threads demanded answers. Holt stepped closer to Reed and Cole, his boots clicking like a metronome of judgment. Officers, he said, did you offer aid to a blind man lost in your noise? Or did you see only a problem to erase? Reed stammered, his voice cracking. He wasn't moving, sir. Seemed defiant. Cole nodded faintly, eyes on the ground. Holt's gaze hardened. Defiant? A 79-year-old veteran, disoriented by your sirens, your shouts, your taser's sting. He gestured to the scarf, its faded stripes catching a paramedic's flashlight. That scarf was tied in jungles you'll never know, where Zeke Carter lost his sight for this country. You saw an obstacle. He is a hero. The crowd, phones still raised, leaned in, their silence heavy with awe. Clara felt tears burn her eyes. She'd filmed it all, but now her hands steadied, capturing Holt's words, the scarf's quiet power. She thought of her brother, his scars hidden, and whispered, "Keep going, General." The scarf, once trampled, now seemed to rise, a banner of truth in a city waking to its shame. Nora stepped forward, her face grim. "General, I've ordered a full investigation. Internal Affairs will dig deep, and will cooperate with any oversight you request." Holt nodded, but his eyes didn't soften. "You'll do more, Sergeant. I'm requesting the Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division to review this. And within the hour, I expect the mayor and police chief at City Memorial to discuss your training on disabilities, on veterans, on force that breaks trust." He turned to an aide who handed him a satellite phone, its click a punctuation of authority. "This scarf," he said, pointing to Zeke, "marks a man who navigated darkness for decades. Your officers plunged him back into it." Reed's shoulders slumped, Cole's hands shook, and the crowd's murmurs grew. A tide of anger, but also hope. Clara caught Colonel Tate's nod in the crowd, subtle but proud. He'd been at a veterans' breakfast nearby when he saw Zeke fall, and his call had summoned Holt, a general who'd vowed never to leave a soldier behind. The scarf, dusted clean by a paramedic's care, gleamed brighter, as if signaling justice's approach. The ambulance doors swung open, ready to carry Zeke away. Holt strode to Zeke's side, his shadow falling over the stretcher. "Sergeant Carter," he said, his voice softening, warm as a hearth. "It's General Dan Holt. You're safe now." Zeke's eyes, sightless but sharp, flickered open, his fingers tightening on the scarf. "General, why?" His voice was faint, raw with pain. Holt knelt, his hand on Shadow's head, her tail thumping softly. "No why, Zeke. Just us here for you. Focus on healing. Shadow's right beside you." He glanced at Reed and Cole, his tone hardening just enough for them to hear. "And those who hurt you, they'll answer for it." The scarf, tucked gently around Zeke's neck, seemed to pulse with his heartbeat. A reminder of battles won and this one yet to finish. Clara felt a lump in her throat. She'd seen Zeke's library readings, how kids hung on his every word. Now she vowed to visit him, to bring those kids, to show him he wasn't alone. The ambulance doors closed, its siren a mournful wail, but the scarf's promise lingered, a thread pulling the city toward reckoning. As the ambulance pulled away, the intersection stood frozen, Humvees like sentinels, soldiers calm but watchful. Nora's radio buzzed, dispatch demanding answers, but she ignored it, her eyes on the crowd. Maya stepped forward, her earbuds dangling, her phone still recording. "I posted it," she said, voice trembling but fierce. "Everyone needs to see this." Her video, tagged #JusticeForZeke, was already rippling across social media. The scarf's image, dirted, then lifted, sparking outrage and calls for change. Maya had been skipping school, restless, but Zeke's fall shook her. She thought of her grandpa, a veteran too, his stories of service echoing Zeke's scarf. She typed furiously, her post a plea. "This man fought for us. Fight for him." The crowd stirred, some joining her, their phones lighting up with shares, demands. The scarf, now a symbol online, wove through digital spaces, tying strangers to Zeke's cause. Holt's aides monitored the buzz, their radios humming with updates. The general had been at a nearby base, reviewing veteran programs, when Tate's call came, a call that moved mountains in minutes. In the cafe, Tate slipped back, his coffee cold but his resolve burning. He'd served with men like Zeke, had seen their sacrifices erased by time. But not today. His call to the liaison, a friend from his service days, had reached Holt, who dropped everything to come. Tate watched the crowd, saw Clara's tears, Maya's defiance, and felt the scarf's weight. Not just Zeke's, but every veteran's. He remembered tying his own scarf in a desert storm, promising to honor the fallen. Now he honored Zeke. The intersection, once a place of chaos, was now a stage, the scarf its centerpiece, drawing eyes to a truth too long ignored. Veterans deserved care, not cruelty. Nora radioed her chief, her voice steady. "We need reform, sir. Now." The scarf, carried away with Zeke, left its mark. A spark that would ignite a city's conscience. A call to right wrongs that could no longer wait. The intersection, once a snarl of horns, now thrummed with a collective heartbeat, stirred by the white scarf that had marked Zeke's fall. As the ambulance's siren faded, the crowd's energy shifted from shock to resolve. Maya stood at the edge, her phone glowing with notifications. Her video, #JusticeForZeke, had exploded online, the scarf's dirted threads a viral emblem of a veteran wronged. Comments flooded in. "He fought for us. Shame on those cops." Maya's fingers trembled as she typed, her grandpa's voice echoing. His stories of Vietnam, his own scarf tucked in a drawer. She'd skipped school today, but now she felt purpose. "We can't let this fade," she whispered, sharing Clara's footage. The scarf's faint gleam in Zeke's hand a call to action. The Humvees stood firm, their olive bulk a silent vow, while Holt's aides relayed updates, their radios crackling. Clara joined Maya, her apron crumpled. "I'm visiting him," she said, voice firm. "The kids at the library need to see him strong again." The scarf, gone with Zeke, wove through their words, tying strangers into a community demanding change. Across the city, the scarf's image spread, a digital thread stitching outrage into hope. In a cramped apartment, Jamal Carter, Zeke's nephew, stared at his phone, the viral video freezing his breath. He hadn't seen Uncle Zeke in months, too caught in his own struggles, night shifts, bills piling high. But that scarf, its faded stripes, was etched in his memory. As a boy, he'd watched Zeke tie it, grinning, before telling tales of jungles and comrades. "This kept me alive, Jamal," Zeke had said, his sightless eyes bright. Now, seeing it dirted, Jamal felt guilt, then fire. He grabbed his jacket, texting friends from the veteran center. "Meet me at the hospital. Uncle Zeke needs us." At City Memorial, nurses wheeled Zeke into triage. The scarf folded on his lap, its touch calming his racing heart. A doctor, her voice soft, checked his vitals, noting the taser's bruising. Shadow, cleared by a vet, curled at his feet, her warmth an anchor. Jamal's text buzzed on a nurse's phone, shared by a colleague who'd seen the video. The scarf, cleaned by careful hands, seemed to glow under hospital lights, a beacon pulling Zeke's people closer. Nora faced the crowd, her badge heavy with the day's weight. The scarf's absence left a void, but its story filled the air, carried by Maya's posts, Clara's resolve, and the soldier's watch. Nora's radio buzzed with her chief's voice, shaken by Holt's demands. "Nora, the mayor's on board. Training reforms, now." She nodded, her eyes scanning the faces. Angry, hopeful, united. She thought of her father, a veteran whose limp hid deeper wounds. This wasn't just Zeke's fight. It was theirs. "We'll do better," she said, her voice carrying. Tate, lingering near the cafe, overheard, his chest tight. He'd called Holt because of men like Zeke, whose sacrifices he'd sworn to honor. That morning, he'd been at a veteran's breakfast, sharing stories of scarves and service. When Zeke's fall unfolded, his call had been instinct, but its impact rippled far. The Humvees, ordered by Holt from a nearby drill, stood as proof. No veteran would be left behind. The scarf wove through Nora's promise, Maya's defiance, and Tate's pride, a thread of accountability tightening around a city's conscience. In the hospital, Zeke stirred, the scarf's weight grounding him as pain ebbed. A nurse, Sarah, adjusted his her hands gentle. She'd seen the video, had cried at the scarf's fall. "You're a hero, Mr. Carter," she whispered. Zeke managed a faint smile, his fingers tracing the scarf's frayed edge. He thought of the library kids, their questions, and a memory surfaced. His first reading, a girl named Lily asking, "How do you see stories without eyes?" He chuckled, tapping his heart. "Here, Lily, that's where they live." Now that heart ached, not just from the taser, but from a world that had misjudged him. Yet Sarah's kindness, Shadow's warmth, sparked hope. Jamal burst through the door, his face a mix of worry and resolve. "Uncle Zeke, I'm here," he said, kneeling. "We're all coming." The Veteran Center crew, alerted by Jamal, was en route, their vans weaving through traffic. The scarf, tucked against Zeke's chest, pulsed with their approach, a symbol of family reclaiming its own. Clara texted the library parents, planning a visit with the kids, Lily among them. The scarf story, now online and in hearts, was no longer Zeke's alone. It was a city's to carry. The digital tide surged, the scarf's image a rallying cry. At a community center, Elena Ruiz, a social worker, watched Maya's video, her throat tight. She worked with disabled veterans, knew their quiet battles. Zeke's scarf reminded her of a client, Miguel, who'd tied a similar one, his pride masking pain. Elena drafted an email to City Council, urging funding for disability training, her fingers flying. "This can't happen again," she wrote, attaching the scarf's image. Her phone buzzed with replies. Counselors, shaken by Holt's presence, promised action. At Pine and Fourth, Maya's crowd grew, students joining. Their signs scrawled with, "See the scarf." The soldiers nodded subtly, their calm a steadying force. Holt, on his phone, coordinated with the mayor, his voice firm. "Training's a start, but we need policy now." He'd been at that base, planning veteran outreach, when Tate's call hit like a grenade. The scarf lived in his words, a demand for systems to see what Reed and Cole had missed. Nora radioed her team, assigning officers to escort Zeke's supporters to the hospital. The scarf's thread, invisible but strong, wove through Elena's advocacy, Maya's signs, and Holt's resolve, pulling a fractured city toward unity. Zeke's room filled with murmurs as Jamal's crew arrived, their boots scuffing the floor. A veteran, Ray, clasped Zeke's hand. "We got you, brother," he said, his voice rough. The scarf, smoothed by Sarah's care, lay across Zeke's chest, its stripes a map of battles past and present. Lily slipped in with Clara, her eyes wide. "Mr. Zeke, you okay?" she asked, clutching a dragon book. Zeke's laugh, weak but warm, filled the room. "I'll read again, Lily. Promise." The moment, soft amid the storm, was a balm, balancing the day's rage with hope. Outside, social media roared, the scarf's image on news feeds, sparking protests at City Hall. Elena's email landed, counselors pledging reforms. Holt's meeting with the mayor loomed, his demands, training, oversight, justice, non-negotiable. The scarf, a quiet cloth, had become a movement, its threads binding Zeke's pain to a city's awakening, a vow to right wrongs that could no longer be ignored. Pine and Fourth grew quiet, the Humvees rolling out, their rumble fading into memory. But the scarf's legacy burned bright, a flame kindled by Zeke's fall and fanned by a city's rise. Reed and Cole, suspended, faced investigations, their actions a stain the department couldn't ignore. The mayor and chief, shaken by Holt's demands, emerged from City Memorial, faces grim, promising reforms, training on disabilities, de-escalation, respect for veterans. Zeke healed, the taser's scars fading, though his heart carried the day's weight. Jamal stayed close, vowing to visit more, while Clara brought Lily and the library kids, their laughter alight in Zeke's darkness. The scarf, now washed, hung by his bedside, its threads a reminder of battles won. Maya's posts kept the fire alive, her hashtags a drumbeat for change. Elena's council push gained traction, funding approved for training that would see the scarf's truth. Holt, in a quiet hospital visit, gripped Zeke's hand. "No one's left behind, Zeke. Not on my watch." The scarf, once dirted, now flew high in a city learning to see its heroes, to honor their sacrifices with care, not cruelty. This story, of a scarf, a veteran, a city's shame and redemption, speaks to us all. It asks us to see the unseen, to lift those who've given so much, to weave our own threads of empathy and action. Zeke's scarf is a call to courage, to stand for those who stand no more, to mend what's broken with hope. Daily Narrated Stories brings you tales like this, raw, real, life-changing, to spark your heart and soul. Comment honor, to salute veterans like Zeke, whose darkness we must light with love. Subscribe to join us, to carry the scarf's promise forward, to build a world where no hero falls alone.